It is week 3 and it's snowing like crazy in here in Stockholm, so I don't know whether I'm going to have problems getting home later on. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, let's go and check out how Aurora's doing. Yo, Patrick! He's gone again. I'm going to see if I can catch him. We picked up Aurora brand new in 2019 from the factory. The plan was to put our boat on a charter program to help with the costs in keeping her. But after a grounding in July 2020, she has been on the hard ever since. It's now 2021 and things are looking up as Aurora is going into the workshop to be made strong again. Join me as I follow the guys at Plastskador and Montage and learn just how this type of repair is done by the professionals. Welcome back aboard Aurora. Patrick and Nicholas have just been here and they've been through a hell of a lot of information about what they're doing on this boat with me, and I'm going to convey that in the best way I can and try and remember all of it as well, so let's get started. Okay guys, the grinding has finished and they've just started glassing everything down into the hull. It's kind of difficult being in here for me now because there's nowhere to be and I'm getting gassed by resin fumes, so I've just got to be careful on how long I actually stop in here. The first part of this process actually is to first of all clean up all of the grinded down glass. Then what they will do is put the first layer down, and that first layer consists of a polyester resin type of glue. It's called Crestafix, and that will help the first layer bond down to the fiberglass really strongly. It'll also make it smooth as well, so the next layers are going to be going on in a good way. You can see that this is exactly the point that Nicholas has got to now. He's put the Crestafix down with the first layer of 900 gram chop strand fiberglass. And that's going to be the initial base layer that needs to be both the strongest bond and smooth as well, so that the next layers can go on top of this. That's 900 grams, it's quite thick. Once the first layer of Crestafix has been laid out with the 900 gram chop strand glass, we need to let that dry so that it can form a good base and it won't move. Then another layer of 900 gram chop strand can be laid. On top of that, there's going to be 3 layers of 1200 gram triaxial fiberglass to go on top of that as well. So that forms 5 layers on the first base, and that's phase 1. Phase 2, once that's all dried off, is to do exactly the same thing again, and it's going to be 2 layers of 900 gram, 3 layers of 1200 gram, and then you've got a really strong base. And I'm guessing that that's going to come up to close to 8 to 10 millimeters of glass there. When doing this as well, when doing the fiberglass work, I was told that it's especially important to get around the corners and around the stress points as well, so that you get a really good bond with the glass around those areas, and make sure it's smooth also, so that you don't get any air bubbles in between or anything like that. Carrying on from last week, a bonding test is done as a double check to make sure that there are no unknowns, such as a previous epoxy repair, any other coats present such as a silicone that will prevent a good bond, and to make sure that they have sanded deep enough. It's an easy test and well worth doing before committing to the entire area. As you can see, this test was pretty successful, both with the polyester and the bonder glue. You can see that they were both pretty well stuck there. What was assessed also is the state of the keel plate here and how that is. Now, if this was damaged in any way, and they've been through and checked that as well, just to see if there's any damages actually around the plate itself. If there was anything, they'd have to come out, but that would cause major disturbance in the structure around here, and they'd rather avoid that if they can help it. They've checked that out, and there's no damages actually with the structure of the keel plate itself. But that means that most of the repairs, because you can't actually laminate anything to the keel plate, most of the repairs have to be done in and around the keel plate. And you can see here that they've gone ahead and used some glass already, and they're starting the process of making that keel plate very strongly bonded into the hull again. You can see here as well, next to that keel plate, that most of what was there before was actually Bonder inside of there, or the hard glue, and this will all be laminated into the hull, making it much more strong. Oh my god, I'm actually getting pretty high in here now. I need to leave soon, to be honest with you. But as I said before, 2 layers of 900 gram, 3 layers of the 1200 gram triaxial here, and then the same process again. So it's phase 1 and phase 2, and then all that will be bonded nicely together. The reason that chopped strand fiberglass is used is actually to conform around all the difficult areas that you have to get glass around. It's very difficult to get really thick, like the triaxial glass there, or the material type of fiberglass, to form around the shapes. So especially when you want to get around awkward corners, if you want to form a lot of layers as well, chopped strand is the stuff that you want to start building those up with. What the triaxial fiberglass does is it really strengthens it from all directions then. So any stresses that you get from both across, up and diagonally, it will take, because it's a really strongly woven glass to put down. Also guys, what's important to mention actually when he's doing the repair, especially in places like this, is that he will have to grind this down and apply glass so that the actual surface is flat. Otherwise, if you just apply glass to the surface, you're going to end up with like a really big bump in the middle of the fiberglass there. So you just need to plan ahead with your glassing, make sure it's perfectly straight, and then start applying the layers, and then you're going to get a nice smooth surface. From my previous experience in fiberglass, and you'll probably see that later in the year when I show you the Anchormatic installation, it's really convenient to have a good space to work in, and then some metal bars as well, so you can cut the glass straight. I tried earlier in the summer to do this inside the boat, and it just really wasn't a good idea. I had to take it home and cut it all out on the floor and try and make a good job of it. But you can see here that they've got it on a good roll, so they can roll it out and just cut whatever they need in various shapes and pieces. Alright guys, well that's all there was to see for today. Let's come back on Friday and see the progress. It's Friday again, and I've arrived at the workshop at Plastskador, and yeah, I bring new toys, but that's for later on. Anyway, let's go inside and see what Patrick's done since Tuesday. There have been so many interesting comments on the last video, and it's been really interesting to read them. I'll try and get back to you as fast as I can. One thing to clarify about the last video is that I never said that Hansas were badly built. With the budget that they have and the time that they have, they're doing the best job that they can. And because the market is so competitive and the margins are so slim, that is the way that these boats are built. And there's a lot of good features on this boat that require a lot of thinking, and they have done a good job in that respect. So, although they don't laminate the grid fully to the hull, and it would be better if they did that, and if they had the time and budget to do it, it would make the boat better, of course. But if you never ground these boats and they never experience anything other than just sailing, they will stay together, in my opinion, for a long time, for sure. It's only when complications like this happen that you see those sort of results. Hansa actually state that they've never lost a keel on one of their boats, and to be honest, I can see why. This keel was really hard to remove actually, and I don't think it would have come off just under normal circumstances. So anyway, let's get into what Patrick has been doing over the last few days. Patrick has gone ahead and grinded all of the top of the keel off to make it super flat and super smooth, and then put the first layer of epoxy on. He's actually gone down at least an inch and a half down there, just to make sure the seal is gone all the way around the keel there. This is only the first layer. There will be 6 or 7 layers of epoxy applied there to make sure that there's a good seal on the metal, so we don't have any rust problems later on. And this is the primer that they're using, in case you're curious. Okay, so next comes the clever part actually, and this part is super cool, and I never thought of doing this way, but clearly the experts know better than me. So once this preparation is all completed, all the epoxy work is done on the keel, and it's all sealed up and smooth and ready to go. It's already smooth actually. And the hull has been grounded off as well, and any repairs and any laminate has been fixed here. The keel will have tape applied to the top of it, and it will be moved over to this area. And then what will happen is the bonding paste will be applied to the bottom of the keel, and the boat will be lowered onto the keel. Now, this bonding paste will then take the exact shape of the top of the keel, right? Once the bonding paste is cured, the boat will come up again, the tape will be removed, and like I said, what that means is that the bottom of the hull will take the exact same shape as the keel, so the actual seal will be a really good one. And once the keel is then lowered again and the tape's been removed, the next stage will be to just put Sikaflex all on the top of the keel, and then push the keel up, and then the seal will be done and the keel will be in place, ready to go, and then they can start working in the holes, putting the compound in there, making it really strongly bonded to the hull, and finally the keel nuts will go on. So it's a clever process, but I think it's going to be really cool to see next week. What they're going to use to seal this keel actually is Sikaflex 591, and there was a comment on the previous video that the Sikaflex will never cure if it's put onto the keel and then sealed against the hull. But talking to the experts actually, it may take up to a year or a little bit over a year to cure, but it will cure eventually, so I'm not so worried about that. One other thing I did over the weekend actually is stripped the prop and the leg of all the paint again. And I used International Paint Stripper for that, and it made the job actually really easy. Some people just sand the paint off, but I thought I'd try the paint stripper, and it was pretty good. I just left it on there for half an hour and just scraped the paint off. It was a little bit messy, but not too bad. And now I'm left with a lot of smooth surfaces again, so that's a job for later on though. Last time I was on board, I mentioned the kitchen, and of course it should be called a galley, so please keel haul me for that. I don't know. Sorry. I have to make a small correction because last time I said that there was going to be 2 layers of 900 gram chop strand and 3 layers of triaxial. Actually it's 2 layers of each, so 2 layers of 900, 2 layers of 1200, but the effect is more or less the same. With slightly less glass, but there's still going to be a fair bit of glass on there, that's for sure. So let's look into more detail of the process. First of all, the Crestafix polyester adhesive is applied, and this will make sure that the bond is super strong between the hull or previous dry layers and the new glass. It creates a much better bond compared to applying polyester on its own. The glass is then laid on top, wetted down with the polyester resin. As you can see, the glass is pre-cut so that the left, right and top side can be glassed separately to better take the shape of the compartment. Then it's laid on top of each other for extra strength. There have been some questions as to why our boat is being repaired in polyester rather than epoxy or vinyl ester. I could make a whole video on this subject, but polyester is more than strong enough for this use if applied correctly. I trust Plastskador when they say this because they have had boats in that have grounded more than once and have been repaired multiple times. Each time the new damages are not from the previous repairs, but tend to move further away from the recent repair, finding the next weakest place, usually further up the hull. So my point being is that there is no point spending much more money on much more expensive resin when the next damage will more than likely be elsewhere in the boat. In a full stop grounding against hard rocks, something has to give. The forces are just simply too great. Polyester is also much easier to wet out, and the gel coat over the top will have a much better finish. It looks super thick and super strong, but there's also a few clever parts what you've got to think about when building the structure back up here, and let's go over that. Firstly, with these letterboxes that have been cut out, Patrick has got to go ahead and build these back up again. And what that means is almost building the shape that was there before on the inside, so Patrick can go ahead and lay the bits that he cut out back in there and laminate those all back in, so we can make the grid whole again. So like I said before, this is phase 1, so he's done one quite thick layer of those 4 layers now, and then once this is all dried after the weekend, he'll come back and he will put another 4 layers on. Patrick will put the next 4 layers down this wall, down to the floor, and out to, I don't know, a few inches past the wall here. Once that's done, he'll then go and build the shape again of this letterbox here, so that when he puts the piece back in, he can laminate that to the wall that is created inside, and then he'll go ahead and fill the edges and whatever, and then it will be nice and smooth and the grid will become whole again. After that, he will then put the next 4 layers on top of the big parts here, the big areas, so that basically this lamination that he will do inside here will be sandwiched in between the next 4. You can see already the extra laminate that Patrick has been putting around this area. If this boat gets grounded again, it's probably not going to break in this area. And that's a little bit of bad news, because what will happen is that the damages will start creeping further out to the sides, and that means taking a lot more furniture apart and trying to get access to the parts that need to be repaired. There is no way that you can stop damage from happening on a boat like this when you hit rocks at like 8 knots. Something has got to give. When the keel is in a T shape like this and all those forces are coming back, all those forces are pushing up on the back here, because the boat needs to be a very stiff boat, because you need to have good sailing performance as well, something is going to give, something is going to break. So even if you make the boat very, very strong in these areas, you might make it more resistant to slower groundings. But if you ground it at, let's say, above 4 or 5 knots, you're going to end up with damages either way anyway. So my advice is just don't hit the ground if you can help it. And if you hit the ground, hit some mud, not a rock. They say there's 3 types of sailors. Those that have hit the ground, those that will hit the ground, and those that don't admit it. Look at this bad boy. It's the Johnson Pump L4000. It fits in there pretty nicely actually. There's plenty of room for me to install it down there, and I think I'm going to go with the option of running the pipe out there. It's the 38mm pipe, or the 1.5 inch pipe, out there through under the shower and to the hull. Some of the comments have suggested that when I run the pipe, I should be running it all the way to the back where the other outlets are, or making sure that it's high enough so that the outlet never goes in the water. However, I think as long as you've got a big enough U-bend or a high enough U-bend, you've got a seacock on the actual through fitting itself, and you've got a one-way valve on the bilge pump, even if the through-hole fitting goes in the water, I don't think you're going to have an issue there. Let me know if you think differently in the comments. So like I mentioned last week actually, there's a few cables that I'd like to run from that side of the boat over towards the fridge area, and also for the bilge pump down here. What people have been suggesting, and what I did think of as well actually, is just running a conduit through, so that later on you can put whatever cables that you want to put in there, which we're gonna do, but we've just got to decide exactly where that conduit is going to go in and go out. You've got to be really careful of the holes that you drill, especially in this area at the back of the keel, because if you keep drilling holes and keep running wires and things like that, you're going to weaken this area, and this is the last thing that you want. So I want to minimize the holes and do this cleverly so that I can get all the wires into the right places very easily. And in case you're wondering, this is the type of conduit that I'm looking to use. Just a plastic conduit, probably thicker than this one, so I can get a few more wires through there. And then later on you can just go ahead and push those wires through. It's even easier if you run a mouse wire through the conduit while you're installing it, so you can just pull the cables through a lot easier. Also, when I'm installing this bilge pump, guys, ideally I want to have a float sensor on it, just like this one. I also want to have an audible alarm on it as well, so that even if you're sailing the boat or you're on the boat, it will wake you up or alert you that there is water actually in the boat. And I want a digital input coming off it, so that the Serbo GX that I've just bought can alert me via email or via text message or something like that. So even if I'm not on the boat, I know that there's water intrusion in the boat. Really cool things to have. So thanks very much for all the comments, guys, that I've been receiving, and it's opened so many subjects actually, and a lot of it leads back to the question of blue water sailboat, production sailboat, right? And there's so many arguments for and against. And to be honest, I've seen so many production boats crossing the oceans. I know that they're prone to probably more problems and they're not as strong as the hand-built boats. But we're making the best of what we want and what we like. And the reason that we chose a new boat is that I love the interior styling, the lightness inside the boat. I don't want a 1970s boat where you feel like you're living in a dungeon down below and there's no light coming in. I know that the sailing characteristics and the practical stuff and the hull strength and everything should factor into it as well, but I do think this is a capable boat also. This is an A-class CE rated boat, which means that it's capable of crossing oceans and dealing with weather above a force 8 gale. So to answer the question, do I think it's capable of taking us around the world potentially one day? Yes. Would I prefer a boat that's been hand-built and designed slightly differently, maybe with a skegged rudder, maybe with a keel that's been built into the hull? Maybe, but we're going to take what we've got, and we really love this boat. We don't regret our choice in buying a Hansa, and especially buying this 418. It's a big boat for going around the Stockholm archipelago, but we really love it and we're making the most of it. The only thing I would have changed in this entire process is the charter program. And the reason why we did it is to help with the savings so we can go cruising later on, a bit further afield. But we don't need it. So right now we're debating whether to continue with that or not. But we'll see this season. That's it for this week. Join me again next week and we'll see how far Patrick's got with the repair. And if you liked the video, drop us a like. Take care and see you next time.